John Coleman. Welcome to the DMV Download Podcast.
Hello. It is awesome to be here. I got to say, I have just a few podcasts that I actually subscribe to.
Cool.
And it's mainly you and Michigan football. So you are up there in my echelon of what I enjoy. So
we love to hear it. And I have to confess, your Instagram Reels and YouTubes are on my list as well. We're just two content creators getting together, really.
Just jamming it out, having a good time, enjoying life.
So real estate, it's on many people's minds, and it's a big issue for people. It's probably the biggest investment, someone will make. And especially for people, in their late 20s, early 30s, maybe even 40s, they're thinking about maybe buying a house for the first time, but there's so much going on right now. We've got high interest rates. We've got, kind of a inventory crisis in DC. We're going to get into all of that. But before we get specific, kind of just tell us, what the state of play is here in the DC region, in the real estate world, in your world.
So the true answer, and the answer that I have to give people, is we sort of know it, but we really don't. And we're continuing to kind of feel out where things are going over the next little bit. You took some good talking points right off the bat. Like we are record low inventory. New listings week over week has been down anywhere from like 22 to 28% in the region over the last little bit. And then interest rates have pushed affordability to a spot where people simply just can't afford what they want to do. And the equation that so many people look at when they're getting going and want to know whether I should rent or buy is the financials.
Yeah.
And right now, those financials actually, in a lot of spots, look better for renting.
Yeah.
So you have to understand the true value of home ownership in a way that helps you see a long-term perspective as opposed to just like a monthly payment, because a monthly payment might not look quite as amazing as it once did.
Right. There's something that I had to conceptually understand too, is like when you take out a loan, you're paying to buy money.
Yes.
Which is kind of a weird, I guess people know about that, but like you're paying and that money is not being invested in the property. That money is just buying you the money that you use to buy the house.
Yes.
And so renting can be advantageous, and with interest rates so high, maybe it's looking like that.
And plus, I had to replace a dishwasher at my rental house a couple months ago, and that's money. If you're a renter, you don't have to do it. My renters didn't have to do it.
Right. They've got a landlord.
Yeah. They got me to take care of it for them. So there's costs that come along with it too. So you have to be financially and mentally and prepared to take care of all of it.
So, our region is multifaceted. We obviously have DC, kind of the center, but we also have some, counties, surrounding it, major counties. What are some areas you kind of look to and I think are interesting as far as the housing market goes?
So all of them have their own wrinkles, right? It's a very generic answer. But the ones that I have been looking at closest is it's really interesting to watch Alexandria, Virginia, because of the whole Amazon effect. And not only Amazon, but like everyone that wants to come be around Amazon is coming in around there. And so that is an area that some of it's already built in there. Like ever since they announced Amazon was coming, the prices around there have just kind of whooshed up.
Right.
So that is one area that I've been watching closely. It's going to be very interesting to watch some of those areas that are a lot further out over the next little while. And that's not to say it's not areas that I don't think people should be moving to. But during the pandemic, we got to a spot where being in the city wasn't cool, right? Like
space. You want space. Everyone's
who wanted
space.
To be in an elevator with all these people when you don't know like what you're supposed to touch and you're wearing masks and like hazmat suits and whatever. And so a lot of people were willing to move out because they didn't really have to commute and more space was the thing. And now we're starting to see that return to the city. And I don't know how your drive over to the office was today, but as a person that's avidly driving around the city at all given times, like traffic is back.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because people aren't using the metro quite as much as they have been. I guess we could look at some metro stats and say that we know that they haven't quite been.
Yeah, it's true.
But it's starting to go up.
Yep.
But still, the traffic around the city has been to the point where people that have to be coming back into the city might not want to be that extra distance out because that commute in is going to be difficult.
Right.
And for a while, it was people leaving the city for more room. I've started to have this year a few people that were in some of the areas of like North Kensington and stuff like that were like, you know what, I kind of want to be in the city because I need to be closer to work, and that just makes life a bit easier.
Right.
So it's been fascinating to watch as a whole.
The in and out trends, the ebbs and flows. So, DC has probably the highest inventory issue of all the places in the area. Maybe you can confirm that or not. So why is inventory so low? Do we know the reason for it? And is there any solution?
So it's funny. I would say DC is not that much different than other areas. Whether you break down DC or a city in Maryland or a city in Virginia, even those cities are going to have sub-pockets of like truly desirable and there's no inventory, and then some areas that have a little bit more. There are spots in DC that there is some inventory to do, and there's more condos that people can pick from than they have been able to pick from in a while. Single family houses, if you're talking about like Chevy Chase DC or Chevy Chase Bethesda or Arlington, yeah, it doesn't feel like there's any inventory. Stuff that comes on that's priced right, that looks about right, is gone. It goes before it gets to the weekend a lot of times. So we're really busy on Thursdays and Fridays. So it's just trying to figure out what that looks like. And one of the complicated things about why inventory is so strained is the number of people that are sitting on low interest rates. How many people do you think have below a 5% interest rate, percentage-wise?
I don't know. Like a good amount. The pandemic, the interest rates were really low, so people got in probably.
89%. There's the sheet right there. Sorry.
89?
Yeah, I should have just
told. I should have guessed, because in my head, just for listeners, I was like, 50, 60, 70. 89.
So we have a lot of people that have super cheap money.
Wow.
And so the day of wanting to just move because it's got a better backyard or I want to be closer to my friends is a little bit different, because if you want to, you got to really like your friends to pay that much more money.
Pay 7%.
Yeah. And it's hard to conceptualize until you get what the numbers look like of how that feels. And it is the interesting thing that we're going to need to watch over the next little while. I think people are getting used to higher payments. And so when interest rates eventually come down in some respect, whether that's 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, or whatever it might be, like, what is that all of a sudden going to do? And how is that going to drive forward? And is it going to create a lot more inventory because people can start to move? But for the time being, people are kind of stuck. Like, people need to move when they, get married or have kids or change in work. But they ain't just doing it to do it at this point.
Right.
And so there's just less transactions.
Now, I have heard some whispers and theories on social media, and maybe you can give this theory credence or say it's not true, that, like, now's the time to buy because when interest rates go low, like, prices are going to skyrocket. Is that even a thought we should be thinking about if you're a potential home buyer? Like, what do you do with that sort of take?
My opinion on a take like that is it's so flaunted as that's the exact thing that's going to happen that I start to grow skepticism.
Right.
Whether that's true or not, we'll have to find out. I think that there has to be some truth to it. Just based on the fact of the number of people that I talk to that just don't want to make the move because of you want to buy more of a house with a higher interest rate, your payment's just so high, and there's only so high you can go, that when the interest rate goes down and that starts to look more attainable, well, more people get in the mix. And what happens when more people get in the mix? This area knows better than anybody. It pushes up prices. So I think that there's a real likelihood that that could happen, but I wear my cap of skepticism that, like, that's the matter of fact what can happen, because we just don't know. Anything can happen.
Right.
Getting ready for our time together today, I talked to a couple mortgage people. I talked to some other agents. Be like, what is your feel? I don't want it just to be me. I want a little bit more of a rounded thought. And the thing I took away was people are in more of a wait and see approach than we've seen in a long time. And what we're going to see over the next little bit is it's driven mainly by interest rates. And if interest rates go up, it's going to make this fall and winter probably feel like last fall and winter as it was going up.
Right.
If they go down, I think more people enter the market and start to take advantage of just cheaper money if they're able to do that. If it stays the same, I think we probably have the most balanced market we've seen in a long time in terms of people looking to buy and sell being out there at the same time.
Right.
I think that there's less inventory, but I think that there'll be less people, and I think that'll magically clear itself out. And as we, I'm not sure if this podcast gets posted right away, so we'll do some fact checking if this comes out in a few weeks. But it's through this month of September where we have that biggest influx coming out of the holiday of inventory coming on the market.
Interesting.
And I think that we have the highest susceptibility of people starting to think like, oh, this market is changing. There's more inventory. There's not quite as many people out there with the money. It's not moving quite as fast. And then what's going to happen is inventory goes down week after week after week for the rest of the year. And so it's going to be a little bit of like, you know, if you crack a piñata and all the candy falls on the floor, like I'm going after the Starburst. And if someone comes a little bit later, they might not have the Starburst. So they're going to have less to choose from late in the year as opposed to now.
Right.
And that metaphor makes sense in my head, so I hope it helps.
Yeah. If you don't start grabbing soon, you get M&Ms. I'm not a big M&M fan.
Classic.
So, you know, when you look at this dynamic between buyers and sellers, is it an even playing field at this point? Like, who has the advantage? Is there a significant leverage, you know, depending on who you are? And obviously, if you're a seller, you're also a buyer. How does that interplay?
It's market specific. So there are some areas where the purchasers are going to have a little bit more like seat at the table to have an inspection. Imagine that, like where you can negotiate things.
Not 2 years ago, probably.
And then there's other areas where things are going to disappear fast. I mean, the last couple of people that we've put under contract in some different areas, we knew the house was coming up. We went there the morning that it came on. We had an inspector there by the middle of the day and had an offer in that night that was very compelling to try to see if we can beat out the competition. And in both cases, we barely beat out the competition. Other people were there, but we had an opportunity to take it down, and it ended up working out for the client. So you have to be aggressive in some of those markets. So it's a little like you kind of talk both sides out of your mouth, and you have to study the individual neighborhoods to understand how you're going to price and what the expectations are going to be. And this is a funny area, right? Like something sits on the market 2 weeks and everyone's like, what's wrong with it? What is going on here? And it's like,
this house has no floors.
Like back in the day, our parents, like it was a foregone conclusion that the house would be on the market for 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And so what I've also seen over the last little bit is people that are selling in markets that are a little bit more difficult, they've gotten a little bit more of a backbone to being like, all right, if it doesn't sell the first couple of weekends, it doesn't mean I'm going to severely discount my price. I'm willing to wait it out and try to find the right one. And there are deals to be had, but I'm seeing a little bit more that people are willing to stand their ground.
Now, zooming out a little bit, you mentioned kind of condos, house, single-family house, and like renting. Can we walk through those kind of 3 pathways of, you know, like living, basically? I think each have their own kind of financial identities. Can we just walk through those if someone's, you know, moving to DC or looking for a switch up? What are the pros and cons for each of those types of living?
So if you're first moving to DC, we have a lot of people that relocate to DC. That's one of the bonuses of DC is people are coming and going all the time.
Right.
It's also one of my like cons. I made a video on YouTube recently about like what are the things I hate about DC, and there's this sad scene in there. It's like sometimes it feels like all your friends are leaving you because like they get their foreign service and they go other places and they go back to Michigan or wherever they're going to go for a little while. And so we have this in and out that a lot of other places don't have. That's pretty consistent. From there, if you don't know the city and you're first moving to this area, I would probably rent. There's so many intricacies and nuances that I would at least take some time and like Airbnb for a couple of months if you need to.
Right.
To kind of get here and feel it out and go from there. If you've been here before and you have friends here, you have a little bit more leeway. It's more about figuring out what the process is and what you're going to do. And then it breaks down into whether you want to get a house or a condo. And I think both have their merits. If I had my own choice, I prefer a house. I like to know that like I own the land that I sit on.
Sure.
And like it's mine and I can kind of do what I want. And there's not an HOA or an association that gets say over stuff. With that said, usually when condos jump in and are the best option is when you can't get a house in the areas that you're looking at. So, you know, DC is expensive and maybe you want to be close to downtown. Well, the best option might be a condo if location is one of your key factors. So it's understanding what you want out of a place, knowing what your things that are just non-negotiables, and then figuring it out from there. And some people love being in condos.
Right.
And that's the beautiful thing is you have to figure out what's right for you. And it's important to take that first step of the process of understanding what you need and what it's looking like to help drive forward the things that's going to make your experience the best. Because what's good for your friend is not going to be good for you.
Right.
but
Right.
they will always pressure you to move close to them because that's how they do.
That's what good friends do. Just
Yes.
kidding. Moving on now to kind of coffee with, Coleman. This is kind of a, media or content kind of world that you've created, about real estate. And there's so many people out there, including me, who just scroll looking at houses because it's so fun. It's such a way to kind of envision your future, think about the future, and it's kind of tangible. And it's nice to see houses and what neighborhoods work. You can kind of get obsessed, with it. How has producing content for social media, been as a realtor? It seems like a newish kind of tactic, or how's it been for your practice, basically?
So I've been dabbling in it longer than some other folks have, because I started with YouTube.
Right.
And YouTube was very much the educational platform standpoint. So that's where I learned it. Like, I broke a toilet seat. I go on YouTube and figure out how to change my toilet seat.
Exactly.
So why not create content that allows me to put something out there for people to learn from? And it has been a really good source of people learning and then thanking me later because they got their home. But some other people saying like, hey, I watched your videos and I would love to chat with you a little bit more about, the process and do it from you. And people get to learn my personality a little bit more. I'm not for everybody. I know that. It's okay. But there are some people that like relate to me a little bit more and maybe a little bit more laid back. And so it gives people a chance to kind of test pit me from afar before actually reaching out, which I think is nice. And so YouTube's been kind of the bread and butter for a while. And it hasn't been until about May of this year where I really jumped into kind of the real game and the shorts. And some of that came with, I went to a conference with my new brokerage and I learned a bunch of things from people. And I was like, all right, I'll go back and I'll try them and I'll see what happens. And I did the first video. That's now kind of the main thing that I do. And that got like 1,200 views. And I was like, that's the best video I've ever done. This is amazing. I'll do a few more. And so I did a few more. And then there was one that I did of this house with a huge garage that was like a separate living thing. And people really, it's polarizing also, right? Because like some people love what I put out there because they love the house. And then there's other people that don't love what I put out there because maybe they don't like me or whatever else.
Whoa.
And so the comment section of my videos is interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, and like everybody deserves a voice. So I'm always interested to go through theirs and read those. And everyone's like, do you read all the comments, even the ones that make fun of you? I'm like, yeah, why not? That's fine. They don't really know me. If they knew me, I feel like they would like me. We'll see.
Totally.
And so then that kind of spun out, and then I just kind of decided to keep doing them.
Right. And have you kind of learned from people's reactions to the houses you show about the market? Like, obviously it's not a objective science, social media and the reactions you get, but people's desires and likes and what they do like and what they don't like.
Sort of. I think one of the things that's most interesting is, for a while I was just trying to pick special properties that were interesting to me. And then through time I would just pick some random properties, or someone would recommend one and I'd go shoot it. And it's one that I'd be like, nobody's going to want to watch this one. This one's silly. And then it'll end up with like 50,000 views. And it's like, okay, well, maybe this is more relatable. Then I'll have people that ask me to check out other neighborhoods, and they want me to go to Virginia and Maryland, and I'll do a little bit of that. But I live in D.C., so it's easier to get to them in D.C. But other parts of D.C., like I will go show something in Kent in Northwest DC, and then I will go over and show something in Anacostia the very next day.
Right.
And I think seeing the different pieces of it and adding some commentary on my ability to be a driver around those neighborhoods all the time and knowing people that live there gives a little bit more of a feel and a vibe to it that you're going to get more than just scrolling through some pictures.
Right. Now, a big process of looking for a house or purchasing either a condo or a home is, finding a realtor. You are obviously a realtor.
Yes.
Tips and tricks for, potential buyers and what they should look for in a realtor,
Yes.
What should you be looking for?
You should interview a few people is the truth. So I'm going to answer this question like you're my friend. Because obviously if you're buying in DC now, we have a relationship and like we're good. But if, let's say you were in Seattle right now and you were looking to buy and you're like, John, how do I pick the right person? I usually ask around to my friend group and see who they liked. I also go online and look at reviews of who has the most reviews. And then I I would sit down, and I have a document with a list of questions that you should ask a real estate agent.
Right.
A list of questions that you can then ask, so then you can start to understand, one, what's their procedure, what's their communication style, are you vibing with them? As crunchy and as weird as that sounds, at some point during the process of buying a home, you're going to feel like you are put into like a foxhole.
Oof.
And like you're trying to make these hard decisions fast, and you want to be like reaching over and like, give me the best advice possible.
Right.
And it's that moment when you have to know that you have to trust the person most. And so taking the time on the front end is going to give you the confidence, and that's going to make the entire experience better when you're going through it. So it's having a methodology to it. It's giving yourself the opportunity. Most people only view one agent. The people that do that with me are just lucky, I guess. I don't know. I'm kidding. There's a lot of really good real estate agents in DC. I have a lot of good colleagues across a lot of different brokerages. And we have a plethora of really good people in this city. But it's important to figure out who's right for you.
Right. Because you're dealing with probably the biggest investment, of your life.
Yeah. Or let's say you want to take advantage of something like HPAP, like a program of DC. Yeah, you don't want to go working with someone that's never done an HPAP deal before.
Right. And explain briefly what that is for those who don't understand.
So HPAP is the Home Purchase Assistance Program. It's a program through DC that lets people afford more of a house and get into home ownership, which is a huge fundamental piece of DC government and trying to make sure that they can get as many homeowners as possible. I actually had a comment on a video last night saying that they don't necessarily think that the program's that good of a program, and I was like, I'm happy you have an opinion. I adamantly disagree because statistics have shown that people that have a house and are included in homeownership over a couple of decades are more likely to have, I think it's something over $200,000 more in wealth during their lifetime.
Wow.
So you're talking more about like generational wealth at that point. And what a great way to get as many of the people in this city involved as possible than having programs to put that at their fingertips that might not otherwise be possible.
Right. And this is when we're like really zooming out, where housing becomes a societal issue, a core societal issue in how a city works and lives and thrives. And it's important. And it seems like the city's trying at least to invest in it.
Yeah. And it's one of the challenges we have in DC that other places don't have. We don't have much more land to build on.
Nor height.
Yeah. Like we can't really build that much more stuff.
Yeah.
So, and that's why you're going to see a lot more condos coming about, and condos, that's good. We need more options, and you'll see houses like you can't see on the video camera on the podcast, but I'm pointing across the street at a house that was divvied up into 2 condos.
Yeah.
So it's one house, now it's 2 condos, and some people hate that because you get pop-ups and they don't look as traditional. But then you have the other side of it of like, okay, well now one house is 2 houses for people.
Yeah.
And it gives more options for people to have home ownership in DC.
Yeah.
In an area that like sometimes we just need it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when you look out to the future, what should people be keeping in mind? We've covered a lot of topics, but if you could just succinctly, a little review here.
Home ownership is a long-term game. Well, it's not really a game, but it's a long-term play, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people get stuck in kind of the finite, close timelines of like, I'm going to buy now. If you're looking to sell it in 3 to 4 years, I wouldn't buy right now. Like I just wouldn't. There's cost of sale in terms of buying and then selling. And you want to, it's kind of like driving a car off the lot. Like you lose a little bit of value because of the cost of sale. So you put yourself to a little bit more risk if you do a tight turnaround. A person that owns a property long term, whether they're living in it or turn it into a rental long term, over time, the real estate market has done one thing, and it has gone up. And I think that'll at least hold itself if you're talking about it from a long-term perspective.
5 years plus kind of deal.
Yeah. If like somebody that tells me that they're going to live in this house for the rest of their lives, like it's no longer worth really worrying about the nitty gritty. Like, first of all, you're going to replace everything in the house over the time. You're going to pay off the entire loan, and you're going to sell it for straight cash after 30 years. And that's assuming that you don't pay it off earlier than that.
Wow.
Like it is turns into a forced savings account for people. So when they're in it for a long term and then they retire one day and they want to sell it, they have some money in that property that they can go live where they can go to Canada or Mexico, wherever they want to be. Or it could be something that they pass on to their family, or there's other options. So real estate as a vehicle like that, as a long-term thing, is one of the best plays I think a person can make. And it's one of the more conservative ones.